Now, oh, thank you for recording. The top order of business. Oh, let me try to flip to my next. Oh, here we go. Oh, sorry, guys. So this next hour is 100% about you. And I would love if you could write down in the chat. You can direct it directly to Coach Michelle Farrell, or you can just put in the chat. She's going to aggregate a list. I would love you to write down one thing that you want to walk away with that will make this hour a success for you. If you post in the chat, then when we get to the Q&A at the end, I can make sure everything that everyone wants to know is covered. Or if I don't have the answer, I'm going to make sure I get back to you on the answer. So if you guys could put that in there right now, that would be wonderful. I'll give you like a few seconds to write anything down if you have any thoughts. And I'll move on to the outline of what we're going to talk about tonight. So as you're writing down what you want to get out of the webinar, I'm going to share the goals that I want to convey during the webinar. So there's three main things. There are three actions that we're going to take together and go over. One is we're going to be talking about symptoms of perimenopause. So you might be going through that already, or you might not have started, but it's really nice to know what it might be. So we're going to talk about the various kind of symptoms, and they're not always going to be things that are stereotypical. Two, together, we're going to create a list of local healthcare providers who are menopause certified, because contrary to what you would, or what you would think, a lot of doctors are not menopause educated, and that's why a lot of women do get dismissed when they bring up things happening to them. And then the third thing we're going to do tonight is we're going to review the types of exercise that our bodies will thrive on during and after menopause, because the permanent hormone shifts affects our bone health, our muscle building ability, and our heart health. So those are my main three goals of what we're covering tonight with you, besides the questions you want answers. So again, I kind of just put it here, the three action items we're going to take care of. So these three things are really important because it's going to make your personal experience a lot less frustrating, while also setting a strong foundation for your new hormonal normal post-menopause. So it starts off with physiology, and physiology is basically talking about symptoms and why they happen. So that gives you a good understanding of what's going on in your body, so that when you talk to your doctor, you know how to advocate for yourself. So you're going to leave with tangible knowledge about that. And then the second one that I have here, medical ally. This is probably the most friction-filled step because it is a pain in the ass switching doctors. Like, you have to research it. You don't know like who's good. So we're going to do that together. And I want you to have a short list when we leave, so that you know at least narrow down like what important things to have in a doctor or a healthcare provider. And then the very last thing is, movement is one thing during this time of life and beyond that we have 100% control over. And we're going to talk about what will create a strong body post-menopause into your elder years. And so let's go into, sorry, I went too fast. Who am I? So thank you guys for being here. I'm Coach Tina Tang. So I'm 53 and I'm post-menopause. The story I'm going to share is going to be a little bit longer than what's on the slide, but I want to give you an idea of the experience I have, which is not going to be uncommon for what a lot of other people will go through. So when I went through perimenopause, I was completely in the dark. It started in my late 40s. I was probably around 47, and my periods were coming every 2 to 3 weeks. So after a while, that starts to get alarming. And I went to my gynecologist to see what was wrong, because, getting your period that frequently doesn't seem normal. And so he thought maybe you have polyps, and that's what's causing this early bleeding. And after a few visits, he had scheduled me for polyp surgery that a colleague would be doing. And then post-surgery, the colleague met with me and said, I didn't find anything. Now, my erratic periods continued, so they're just super short. And other stuff was happening at this time. And I noticed stuff like my hair seems thinner. And I just thought, oh, I guess this is probably just about getting older. Then 2 years later, at around 49, I stopped being able to sleep. And it started like I was visiting my parents. And then on that first night, I was lying there wide awake and I couldn't fall asleep. And I was exhausted. I was like, okay, the next night, I'll be so tired, I'll fall asleep. And I honestly couldn't. And I went through months of little to no sleep. And trust me, I tried everything holistic. I'm like, people are like, take magnesium every night. So that worked for about a month. I tried CBD oil, which worked for about a month. Tart cherry juice, because there's research showing that that's helpful. Ashwagandha. None of it was long lasting for me. And I got very desperate and I was exhausted. So I went to see my primary care provider. And he was like, I don't know what to tell you. He reluctantly prescribed Ambien. And with Ambien, I became addicted. Addicted in the sense that if I didn't take it, I couldn't sleep. And that's one of the things sometimes with sleep meds is it also becomes slightly psychological. So I didn't want to have to take Ambien all the time. And I did some research and made appointments with a sleep psychologist. That's such a thing, and we can talk about that, and a pulmonologist. And I was able to get off Ambien and eventually sleep again. And it was using a method that the American College of Physicians, which is the conservative governing body, actually recommends as your number one line of defense. And that is CBTI, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. But my primary care provider didn't even suggest that, neither did the gynecologist. So in retrospect, from the knowledge that I know after operating in the dark for like 3 years, I was experiencing the most common perimenopause symptoms. And the awful thing about it is that neither my gynecologist nor my primary care provider said, you know what, you're 47, 49, these symptoms are common, you're probably in perimenopause. And that was classic for that, but none of them said that. And had I known that, I probably wouldn't have suffered for 3 years thinking that something was wrong with me. And at that time, and probably still, I'm sure for a lot of people, no one I knew, not even my mom, had talked about perimenopause. Like I had no idea my mom went through it until after I had already gone through it and asked her about it. So we don't know like that a woman's body in her 40s will start to feel and operate differently simply because of hormones. And so this is why I created this webinar. I don't want you to feel anxious, feel alone, or in the dark during this really normal part of a woman's life. So I want to talk about it so that menopause and perimenopause is a normal thing. And we all know what to expect and that what we deserve from our healthcare providers. All right, that's my spiel. Let's move on. So let's talk about why the hell we actually even get symptoms. And I love this graph because it visually shows what's happening in our body. So as you can see on the childhood area, the hormones, you're the two main hormones that affect us, especially at this time in life in perimenopause, is progesterone and estrogen. And estrogen's also specifically estradiol. So you can think of them as synonymous. And when you're children, you have super low levels. So this doesn't quite affect you. And you can see in the teen years, the hormones start ramping up. And this is when we're starting to get our periods. We're starting to get acne. You start having, moodiness as a teenager. And then in the reproductive years, as you can see how the cycles regulate. This is when our cycles become normalized, right? It just becomes much more predictable. And then you can see as you get under that section, perimenopause, that's when the body's starting to prepare for our post-reproductive years. And you can see how it's unpredictable fluctuations of progesterone and estrogen. And then, where it says menopause, that's when our hormones kind of reset to a new normal. That area should really be called postmenopause. So I want to share 2 examples of people where you won't necessarily know you're in perimenopause because it's not the typical symptoms. So Oprah's talked a lot about it in the past few years. So for her, it started around 48. She never had a hot flash. Her main thing was heart palpitations. And I remember reading that another thing she noticed that she just started to feel blah. Like she wasn't depressed. It was like the world took on a shade of gray. And as you can read in her quote, she had heart palpitations. She went to all these doctors and they put her on heart meds. And what happened was, I think with a little bit of her own research, she thought, I might be in perimenopause. And when she talked to her gynecologist, and she actually went on hormone therapy, as soon as she went on hormone therapy, her heart palpitations went away and her mood lifted. So that's an example of someone with a lot of money who didn't even know she was going through perimenopause. This other person I put up, Amanda Thebe, she's a personal trainer, and she wrote a book specifically about her experience because she had a more extreme experience. For her, all her symptoms started when she was 43, also did not have a hot flash. Hers was dizziness and nausea. And then she talks about the debilitating depression she had. So describes herself as an extrovert, and she's a trainer. So she would go and work, come home, and she's got a whole family with kids. She would just sit in front of the TV and be sobbing. And this is for like a year. And her kids and her husband were like, what the hell's going on? And none of her doctors really knew because they thought she's too young to be going through perimenopause. And this quote is very, I think it stands out for me, is like that she was feeling isolated, thinking no one would understand what she was going through. And that's why we are here today. So if you could, I would love if you share either directly with Coach Michelle, or you can just post in chance. Have you been experiencing anything? Have you talked to your doctor? If you've experienced stuff, how long you have been experiencing. I wanted you to post so that that we can kind of aggregate, get an idea of what you're going through, and also so that other people in this webinar can feel like they're not alone, that there's stuff going on and it's totally normal. And remember, for me, it was insomnia, the erratic periods, I noticed thinning hair, and also for me, also libido. And we'll talk more about that because that is not a rare thing, totally normal, but it's helpful to know what's causing it because then you can do something about it. So if you guys want to write stuff, that'd be great. You don't have to share it publicly. You can just send it directly to Coach Michelle. And Coach Michelle, I don't know if you want to share a little bit because I'm going to go straight on to the next part, which is going through the main symptoms. Okay, I think she's cutting and pasting. So I will move on. So let's talk about these three main symptoms. Doesn't mean everyone has it. These are the three top most complained about symptoms of perimenopause that you'll hear people. It's like a thorn in your side as you're like, so these are the three common ones. So weight gain, and I've heard clients say this, and people, they're like, I'm still exercising the same. I haven't changed my diet, but it's like I put on weight and I can't shake it off. So this is very common. We'll talk about more the relationship with estrogen later. Hot flashes. So everyone knows about this as a common symptom, hot flashes, night sweats. And I think half of my friends get this and half the people I know don't get it. And what it feels like, if I can describe it, because I haven't felt it, it's like you're sitting somewhere, all of a sudden you just start sweating. You're like, you just like get real hot. And for some people at night, it becomes like a rush of adrenaline. So this is probably the most well-known symptom, but plenty of women do not get them. And then the last main one that is, I guess, more well-known or more irritating in daily life, because sometimes it'll affect you at work, is your mood. So it's not just swings. It's like you're just getting really irritated and pissed off, like frequently. You're like, I don't understand why this, like, there's no specific logical reason, or you're just feeling depressed, like we talked about with Amanda Thebe. And for some people, it can be just complete anxiety all the time. And you're like, I don't understand. There's nothing happening that's making me anxious. So these are three key main ones that people complain about, but there are so many. So there's literally, I had a doctor, in one of my podcasts, she said there's like at least 72 different symptoms. So here are some of the ones I've talked about, like insomnia. Some people actually get really achy joints or joint pain, decreased libido because it's our hormones. Vaginal dryness sounds like you've probably seen ads for it, but this is legitimately a thing because estrogen affects our skin elasticity. And that doesn't just mean on your outside skin, it also means inside our body. Headaches, and some people probably know this, like if you've ever gone on, what do you call it, the pill or anything, some people, it gives them headaches. So hormones can create that kind of effect. Some people feel like that creepy, crawly skin feeling under, like on their fingers or other parts of their body. Forgetfulness is one that if you've been pregnant before, people will talk about mommy brain, which is when they forget stuff, and that's related to hormones. It also happens during menopause. thinning hair, and then heart palpitations. And there's a lot more, but those are some of the more notable ones. And what I want you to remember is that just like when we were teenagers, nobody has the same experience. You're not going to have the same severity nor the same list of symptoms. But the key is to know, what how old you are, what your period looks like, so you know how to advocate with your doctor. So a very common question that you'll probably see sold on Instagram and different places is, oh, actually, sorry, I skipped a page. We're going to talk this. Okay, I'm sorry, friends. Let's talk stats first before we go into that part. I think I lost my order. So let me describe what menopause is, because you hear it as a phrase. So menopause is literally actually just one day. So from the last day you get your period, 1 year passes. After that full year of no periods, you are officially in postmenopause. So that first day of that full year is menopause, and after that, you're postmenopause. So if your period ended December 31st of 2023, and then all of 2024 passed, by January 1st of 2025, that's your day of menopause, and January 2nd, you're postmenopause. So that's what marks menopause. Now, let's talk about what perimenopause is. It's everything leading up to that full year of no period. So it can last 2 years up to 10 years. And as you can see there, I wrote down the average is 4 to 5 years. So what that means, if we do the math, in America, because it's a little different depending on culture, in America, the average age of menopause is 51. So like, I think I stopped getting my period at 50. So I'm, around there, but the average age is in the States is 51. So if you do the back math of the average, that means perimenopause is starting around 45, 46, right? But because it can be as long as 10 years, for some women, it makes sense. It can be in their early 40s. Let's move on now to see, is there a test? So this is what you might see online. Is there an actual hormone test to tell you that you're officially in perimenopause? You'll see people talk about the Dutch test, and the answer is no. There is no test that's like black and white, you are in perimenopause. And I want you to know that so you don't get fooled into buying some kind of test, but we'll talk about how you can talk with your doctor. So you have to remember, if your hormones are fluctuating and you take a test, it's literally like taking a Polaroid shot. That Polaroid shot's not going to tell you black and white, you're in perimenopause if it's fluctuating. You could have a day where your hormones are in a normal range. So the number one way to know if you're starting or if you're in perimenopause is your irregular periods. So that could mean your cycles are shorter, like mine were, like every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, or super spread out. It could also just mean you're getting super heavy flows or super light flows. So you know best what your body used to be, what your normal period is like. If that's starting to change consistently, you're probably in perimenopause. So there is no actual test to test it. The second thing is, I've had a question like, well, what if I'm on an IUD, like the Mirena, and that subdues bleeding? So your number one sign, since you can't track by your irregular periods, is having symptoms. So if you're starting to notice, I'm not feeling like my normal self, this kind of stuff is happening, that's when you know you need to talk to a menopause certified provider. And they'll kind of guide you, like they'll know your average age and then help you figure that out. Recently, there is a test called Clear Blue, and it's a menopause stage test. So I said there was not a specific test, but there's something called Clear Blue that came out recently. And what it does is it tests the FSH, which is your follicle stimulating hormone in your urine, but it's like a 5-day test. And it combines that information with your age to kind of give you an idea where your transition is. But none of that is as reliable as looking at your period, your symptoms, and talking to your menopause specialized healthcare provider. And again, so I'm showing you this graph again, because if you look at the perimenopause section, it's an example why it's really hard just to take a blood test, a snapshot in time to say you're definitely in perimenopause. So in here, I wanted to illustrate why we have symptoms. So as we know, through this period of time, your estrogen and progesterone levels are fluctuating, and it causes a lot of symptoms in menopause, but the main actor is estrogen. So the decline of estrogen has the most significant impact that affects all these symptoms and our health. And I listed all the roles that estrogen has in our body because we usually think of it as just reproductive, but it really does so many things. So thermoregulation, like that's if your body knows it's like it's too hot, it's too cold, you sweat when it feels like it's getting hot because it's the body trying to cool itself down. So when you have less estrogen, that bandwidth of its detection gets affected. And that's why people get hot flashes or night sweats. With bone density, estrogen maintains our bone density. And that's why bone loss is a significant physical effect of menopause. And we'll talk about this in a little bit, but 60% of women over 50, they actually have low bone density or osteoporosis, and it's heavily related to estrogen. It has a big role in our heart health, our cholesterol levels. As I wrote, skin elasticity, all the things, mood regulation, but the last one I think is one of the symptoms we talked about. So fat distribution. Estrogen affects how our energy is stored and where it's stored. I know it sounds like gloom and doom. You're like, oh my God, Tina, I'm in perimenopause. What do I do? Well, that's why we're here. So let's talk about this. So we're talking about physiology, which is understanding what your symptoms might be, why they're happening. And it's really helpful because it's not gloom and doom. Like this is just part of transition and we settle into a new normal, but this will help you in knowing what to talk about with your doctor, because a lot of these things do have remedies that can help you mitigate anything that's deeply affecting your daily living. And so that's why we're making the next one a major action item that I want to focus on, because which is to find a medical ally, because many doctors are not menopause educated. And I just wanted to now to, come on. So I'm sharing this is just an example of stuff that friends have sent me. The top one is from a friend who's 43. She tracks her cycle. As you can see, the 17-day, 32-day, 25-day, that's not regular. She already feels this weird. And her OB said, you're too young to be in menopause. So she's 43. And then we just looked at the numbers. 43 is not too young to be in perimenopause. It's absolutely possible that she's in it, especially if she believes you know your body best. And then the second one was from someone who has a doctor, an OBG, that's very dismissive. Like if you read through the thing, so she's 53, she still gets her periods, but she can tell that's total, the periods have changed. And her OBG is just like, just be patient and suck it up. So if you're having symptoms, you do not need to suck it up. And we can also talk a little bit later about, there's just a lot of different remedies if you have the right doctor, that you have options to help you through, and you do not need to suck it up. So this is going to our next part, the medical ally. The best place to find a doctor who really knows what's going on is a Menopause Society certified doctor. And it's going to be really crucial in your 40s, and not just then, because if you with an OBGYN and it only deals with like mainly dealing when you were pregnant, they're not going to know all this stuff. You need someone who has education in midlife and beyond. And it sounds like all doctors will have that, but as we all know from going to doctors we like and doctors we don't, it depends on how much education that doctor invests in themselves. So the Menopause Society, to get certified, is actually quite a rigorous education and exam. So it's not just them paying to get certified and getting certified. So if you guys could, I would love for us to, let me flip through my pages, to actually, if you together pull up on your computer, we're going to go through the steps on how you find a doctor. So if you have your laptop ready, oh, sorry guys, I have to flip through my pages, trying to keep organized. I want you to have your laptop ready because we're going to go to the site to start with your short list of how to find a menopause certified. It doesn't have to be doctor, it could be nurse practitioner, whatever. So I want you to open up your search engine, and this is what you're going to type in. You're going to type in menopause.org. And when you're on this website, you'll see there's a section at the top that says for women. You're going to click on that. I put a little arrow, find a menopause practitioner. So this is their US directory. And then as you click that, there should be a little section that says putting your zip code in so you can find someone within 1 to 5 miles of you. And I'm going to pull up the example of what happens for me. So this is a list of when I type in my zip code, and I just circled one as an example. Dr. Denisha Potter McQuilkin, I've actually had her on my podcast answering questions because she's just so well qualified. So as you can see, everyone in this directory, all the way to the right, is a NAMS member. That means they are certified. They passed the exam. They went through the education and passed the exam. So that's a North American Menopause Society member. And some of the other acronyms, I quite like that Dr. Denisha is FACOG, and that stands for, as you can see, Fellow of the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. So she had to get board certified and meet additional criteria so that she knows the latest medical guidelines, treatments, and techniques in women's healthcare. And that's really important because for a long time, a lot of doctors have been under remembering old research that happened, I think, in the 1980s, the Women's Health Initiative, and which is why people were scared off ever from being prescribed hormone replacement therapy, also known as hormone therapy. But there's been a resurgence of it because more research has come out showing that the faultiness of that test, because all the hormone therapy research back then was done on women who are over 65, which is not your normal perimenopause age. So that's an example of why you want to have a doctor who's current on the research. So hopefully you guys can see, like, you have a bunch of names near you. So this is what I would suggest as your next steps. This is how I found when I changed gynecologists. So once you have that list of names near you, I literally jot it down on a piece of paper. I know, especially in New York, we have a gazillion. So I tried to narrow it down. Then I pulled up my insurance website to the side. I literally would be like, so this is where it takes work for you. And this is going to be your homework after the webinar. You're going to be typing, okay, let me try this name. Let me try this name. You're going to end up crossing off a lot of names because your insurance will only cover some of them. And once you get your short list of names, this is where I would actually go look at online reviews. Because as you know, there's plenty of doctors who have terrible bedside manner, and you don't want that. So I wrote down, like, these are probably some of the key ones. If you type in the doctor's name, I usually type in like Dr. Denisha Potter reviews, and then I would see the reviews and things that people have said. And this is where it's also helpful, like when you have a good experience, to leave a message so other people will also know that the doctor was great. All right. So, sorry guys, that went too fast. Now that we've talked about how to find the right healthcare provider, I want to go on to the next actionable item when we talk about exercise. So now it's important because this is one of the most controllable aspects of your peri and post-menopause health. But before we even talk about the specific exercise protocols to add in for your heart health, your bone and muscle strength and integrity, the most important question that I want you to answer, you can even, actually, I'll get to that question, is how much do you move right now? When I say move, I mean just not sitting down. So I use my iPhone health app as a way of figuring out how much I'm not sitting. And that is what leads me to the slide steps. So I want to know, how many steps are you getting on an average day? And so this statistic's very interesting. So the Mayo Clinic says that the average American walks between 3,000 and 4,000 steps a day. And I know from when if I start training somebody and I ask them, how many steps they get a day. If someone who's not as active, it's usually around 3,000, and that's not bad. So if you're getting less than 3,000 steps a day, you're not going to even care about what I'm going to talk about next, which, like with the exercise protocol, your number one priority for your health is getting that at least 3,000 or more a day. That's your number one daily priority. Oh, sorry, guys. Did I get, no? I thought I was missing something. There we go. So if you're thinking, okay, Tina, but how do I do that? I just wanted to give you a tip on how I do it with clients. So let's say you're getting 2,500 steps a day. Your goal now is to add on 1,000, so make it 3,500. And you want to try to do that every single day. So of course, some days will be a little more, some days will be a little less, but by the end of the week, you want your daily average to be around there. And the way you gradually increase it is every couple weeks, I would add 500 steps to that goal. To me, I feel like that is your most important thing in terms of your health if you're not doing that already. And I just wrote down here, if you're wondering, well, Tina, isn't working out more important? So if you think about workouts, even if you go 3 times a week, those 3 hours sitting behind a desk the rest of the time is not as effective as if you're taking a walk every day. So I want you to first build your walk habit. Now, I want to show you why the walking is so important before we get on to specific exercise protocols. This is from the CDC. Only 25% of Americans or adults over 18 are meeting the federal guidelines. And you know the federal guidelines are not going to be that rigorous, right? They're talking about baseline health. So 25% of Americans are meeting the federal guidelines for strength training and aerobic physical activity. I'll tell you what the actual guidelines are. The CDC is saying you need to get 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity cardio. So that's 2.5 hours worth a week. And then they also recommend 2 days of strength training. So 25% of Americans are actually doing both of those. And as you can see, the major statistic, 46% of Americans are doing neither. So that's why I say focus on the walking before we get into the weeds of exercise. All right, friends, we're going to go on to the specifics. So if you're getting your steps in, and you might even be doing something like yoga or bar or Pilates, I want you to put the next thing as your priority for your health. And that is to bring in strength training. And this is why. So in perimenopause, we know that the estrogen levels start declining, as we discussed. And one of the roles of estrogen is muscle growth. It helps you create muscle. And it drives the development of lean muscle mass. And without it, our bodies are not good at building muscle. And our muscle mass declines precipitously throughout perimenopause. And it's why we need to be increasing our strength training, specifically lifting heavy. And that's going to be a little different for each person based on where you're starting from. Because you need to stimulate muscle growth to make up for the decline. I didn't put the stat in the slide, but I want to just read it out to you. Strength declines 30%. So 30% between the ages of 50 and 70. So that's basically post-menopause. Your strength declines 30%. And after 70, you can even think about your moms, it just nosedives. We do not want to get frail as we get older. So here's also a study that just blows my mind. The Framingham study, as you can see, shows that 40% of women 55 to 64, so that's basically the post-menopause years, they can't even lift 10 pounds. And I do not want that to be you. And it's not about, and not being able to lift 10 pounds doesn't just happen overnight. It creeps on you gradually. So besides strength training being important for your muscles, let's talk about it for your bones. Besides promoting muscle growth, estrogen, it increases your calcium absorption. It maintains bone turnover and density. So as you can see, in peri and postmenopause, our bone density declines quickly. And this is why you think of elderly people breaking bones. I mean, this blows my mind. 50% of women over 50, so that's basically saying 50% of women who've already gone through menopause will break a bone because of osteoporosis. And then this other percentage of 1 out of every 3 women, and this is I'm supposed to add in, 1 out of every 3 women over 50 have low bone mass, which is also known as osteopenia or osteoporosis. And I can tell you, because I lift weights, that I was diagnosed with osteopenia. So even I have low bone mass, and they'll when you get a DEXA scan, they scan your wrist, your spine, and your hip. And for me, it's in my hip. But it's important to know that, because then you know what you need to focus on for your body. So now that you got all the scary stats, it's me trying to scare you to lifting weights. You might wonder, well, how am I going to start? Especially if you're not doing it already. So lifting weights or lifting heavy, it's going to be different for everybody. So, but the important thing is you're what they call in fitness progressively overloading, which means you're pushing yourself a little bit more over time. I don't mean like from Monday to Wednesday, but from a couple months to the next couple months. You don't want to be using the same weights for years. And again, I'm repeating, the CDC guidelines recommends strength training twice a week. And what that means, especially if you're a beginner, and this is how I structure it when I work with a beginner, twice a week. And it could be just for 10 or 15 minutes, because at this point, you're just trying to build a habit. You're just trying to get used to, like, I need this in my life. I'm going to fit it in. So 10 to 15 minutes is fantastic. And I know sometimes that term strength training can feel very like this ominous big thing, but it's stuff you probably already have seen or done. And so these are examples of strength training. You're squatting, you're lunging, you're pressing weights overhead, you're doing push-ups even from a table, you're doing rows. All of that is considered strength training. So before I got to this hit and sit, I don't mean to scare you guys. So before we move on to the second protocol that's really important, I want to just emphasize, lock in the steps, lock in the strength training. The stuff that's coming after is important, but not unless this stuff is first dialed in. So now we'll go into what I just pulled up. So let's talk about HIT and SIT. HIT stands for high intensity interval training, and SIT stands for sprint interval training. And I'll tell you why this stuff is important. As you can see, so during menopause, we experience a decline in estrogen, and it leads to a variety of changes in our body. HIT and SIT workouts serve as an alternative gateway for our body to replace some of the roles of estrogen. So this is another role that we didn't previously discuss. Estrogen promotes insulin sensitivity. So insulin is a hormone in our body that helps bring the sugar that's in your blood to your cells, to your muscles for energy. So of course, if estrogen is lessening and flatlining, our bodies just become more insulin resistant. And that makes it harder for us to use like starch from foods or get your blood sugar use that effectively, because it becomes fat storage. And for this reason, there's me swinging bells as an example. When peri and postmenopausal women benefit a lot from turning up the intensity of cardio. So that doesn't have to mean kettlebell swings. It can mean you're running, you're biking. You could be doing body weight exercises. The intensity is measured by your heart rate. And I wrote down, you want it to be working at 85% or higher of your maximum heart rate. So I put a calculation down here. This is a rough way of figuring out what's my maximum heart rate. So the 220, whoever did this was a mathematician. I'm just gonna tell you, just remember 220. So for example, for me, I subtract 53 from 220, and the number I get is 167. So that means my maximum heart rate, like if I'm pushing all out, is around 167. So I'm trying to hit 85% of that. My number ends up being around 142. So I want to try to get my heart rate up to 142 or a little bit higher. And that is considered high intensity interval training, if I can get my heart rate like that up during intervals. And we'll go more into that next. I want to explain or show in a study as to how our bodies are affected by it. So you can see here in this 2019 study, they had women who are already postmenopause, ages 47 to 70, doing 20 minutes of sit. So sit is the sprint interval training. And then the description of what they did is a perfect example. They were sprinting on a bike. So most likely one of those assault bikes, which are like the devil, if you've ever done them. So they're sprinting on the bike for 8 seconds, going as hard as they can. And then they'll go 12 seconds, like super easy pace. So they're doing that back and forth for 20 minutes. And I can tell you, I know what that feels like. It probably felt like hell. But they're pushing their heart rate high. So in the experiment, they did it 3 times a week for 8 weeks. So you can see the results they found on these women between 47 and 70 was they lost body fat, they regained muscle, and they improved their aerobic fitness by 12%. So what puts it into perspective is that was only 8 hours of exercise if you aggregate it over 56 days. So over 8 weeks, 8 hours of exercise produced that kind of results because they were pushing the upper limits of their aerobic fitness. And just a little bit as to why this high intensity works well for us. What it does is when you're working that hard, your body wants carbohydrates and wants the blood sugar, and it brings it to the muscles. So if you're doing strength training along with a sit or a hit, together, it helps in creating muscle as well as optimizing your heart health. And you remember that estrogen plays an important role regulating cardiovascular health. So when our levels decline, that's why a lot of postmenopausal women experience an increase in cardiovascular disease. And cardiovascular disease is the number one reason or number one cause of death for women. And so this is how adding in hit or sit training is helpful for your heart health. And I wanted to kind of just get a little bit more into detail of what it means. What I like about a true hit or sit is it's meant to be short. So you can see here, sprint interval training means you're working so hard. It's like your legs are burning. You're like, can I do this any longer? And it's not a lot of time to work that hard. It's under 30 seconds because you can imagine trying to run as hard as you can. It's not lasting more than 30 seconds. And it requires long rest periods because you want to be able to perform at that same rate. And that means resting. So hit, which is probably something you see a lot when you go to fitness classes these days, even though in those classes, they're not quite hitting this effort because this requires a maximum effort. So you're hitting that 80, 85%. Again, if you have a heart rate monitor, you can measure it. And then, so your work periods might be a little longer than sprint interval training, and your rest periods are a little shorter. But those are examples of hit and sit. Oh, before I move here, just know that it's not going to be an hour-long time. This is why the kind of dosage. So after I was describing all that, sounds like, oh my God, this stuff is so great. Should we do it all the time? And the answer is no. You don't want to overdo it. The dosage matters because you don't want to get injured. Remember, if you're going that hard, you also need recovery in order to be able to go that hard again. So, and ideally, adding it in twice a week. So that's like twice a week for 20 minutes or less, or you can do it. Tack it on to the end of your workout as a finisher, or you could do it just on its own. And if you're already active doing sports and everything else, hitting it once a week is fantastic. So remember, the order of operations is make sure your steps are down. After your steps are down, then you want to make sure you got your strength training in. Once you have that dialed into your life, you can add in the hit or sit. So those are important. I want you to think about that order because thinking of all of it at once is going to be too much. And then if you got that in, we can talk about the very last exercise protocol that is very helpful for our bodies. And that is plyometrics. So this is also known as jump training. And I put the reasons why it's important for our bodies and how it relates to estrogen. So estrogen helps our bodies, our muscles create forceful muscle contractions. It helps us generate power. So if you think like what's power? Power is like when you think of an Olympic sprinter going like really fast, like pushing their legs off the ground. You can think of it as using your strength quickly. It's like your reaction time. And so without estrogen, we need a stronger stimulus to pick up the slack and help keep our muscle fibers strong and firing quickly and powerfully. And this is where plyometrics comes in so that you can still train that quality in your body. And not only, I mean, everybody's losing speed and power with age. That's like the number one thing to go as anybody, male or female, gets older, but we specifically lose it after menopause. You know, I like to show you my research. There's me doing pogos. So that's an example of plyometrics. So there was a study in 2015 where it was with a cohort of women, and they found that when they jumped 10 to 20 times a day, basically doing what I'm doing there, which is the pogos, it significantly improved the bone density of the women's hips. And I think what's most notable is that the non-jumpers lost bone mineral density during the course of the 4 months. I also love this graph to give you an idea of why jumping is great for your bones. So as you can see in this example, you see how the elite sprinters are like 6 to 7 times, but for us, it'd be something more like jumping and taking off. So when you jump up and land, jumping and taking off is your bones absorbing 2.5 times your body weight. So I gave an example of a woman who's 150 pounds. So that means her bones, when she jumps, are supporting 375 pounds. That's challenging her bones with 375 pounds. Now, this is significant. If you're not a power lifter, I do powerlifting. Squatting that amount of weight is only possible for a rare group of people who are dedicated powerlifters. So one way to really challenge your bones is through jumping. Now, I know a lot of times people might have knee issues. You want to start jumping, but you don't know how to get started. And you're not going to just go straight into tuck jumps or broad jumps. So if you're at the part of your exercise regimen where you got your strength training dialed in, you had your walks dialed in, you've added in some HIIT, a great way to get started in plyometrics. There's a website. Oh, actually, that's what he's very popular on Instagram because he is an ex-broad jumper, a competitive broad jumper. He has a company called Plus Plyos where they have beginner plyometric programs. And it's fantastic. Or another way to add in jumping is, working with a trainer who's going to progress you, because your body needs to build the tissue and the capacity to handle jumping, because otherwise you go straight into like tuck jumps, broad jumps, you might feel your knees feel too much of an impact. So an example is I incorporate beginner plyometrics with my personal programming clients. Like after their warm up, they'll do something like what you see in the video, like pogos. So once you're ready to add in plyometrics, know that it's not going to have to take up a big chunk of time. You don't have to do an hour of it. You just add a little bit in. It's like little doses. And I just wanted to express why jumping is so great for you. So I started it probably about a year ago because I think of it as training your athleticism. It's training you to be more reactive and coordinated. And then when you think of people in their 60s to 80s, you never say, oh, that they're agile and quick. So you can think of jump training as in working on those qualities. And again, your body needs to build the muscle tissue, get your nervous system ready. So what I showed you in the previous, those pogo hops are a great way to, if you want to just start small. And other examples of jump training is stuff you probably have seen in classes before, like squat jumps, jumping jacks, box jumps. But I think the most accessible one is the good old-fashioned jump rope. And I know you're thinking, oh, that's easy. Try jumping rope if you haven't done it in a long time. I was tripping all over the place. It's stuff that people can do that we did as kids are not so easy when we're older. All right. We finally have come to the end where I'm going to summarize and we're going to go through Q&A together. So here's the summary of what we just talked about. Perimenopause. You know you're in it when your periods have changed. They're shorter, they're longer, they're heavier, they're lighter than the past. You know your body, what your normal period is like. If it's starting to change, you're probably in perimenopause. Know that perimenopause can be only 2 years long, or it can last for 10 years. That means it might take a long time before you stop getting your period. And once you stop getting that period for 1 year, you're officially postmenopause. And I want you to remember, especially, that the symptoms can range. Like everyone's different. It's going to have some kind of, tying together, but if you're around a certain age and you're starting to notice different things happening, you can explore that as a possibility to talk to your doctor. So the most famous ones that everyone talks about are hot flashes, but a lot of people don't get that. And then remember, insomnia. I think 50% of women over 50 have insomnia. So that's probably a very common one. Sometimes it's because you're getting hot flashes and it's waking you up at night. Weight gain is very common. Thinning hair, all that kind of stuff. There are remedies. I can talk about the different things that people can do that you can talk to your doctor about. I want you to think about exercise because this is important, and also just for the health, as you get older. Walking is your first priority. Your next step would be adding in strength training 2 or 3 times a week. Then think about adding the HIIT or the sit 1 or 2 times a week, and then you can think about the plyometrics. But dial in on the most important things first. And I'm giving you homework. I want you to, after the webinar, make sure you start thinking about your short list and ideally make an appointment if you're around the age that this is all applying to. If you're coming in this webinar as someone who's being preemptive, good for you. And now you know exactly what to expect and what kind of doctor and how they should be treating you. So before we get into the Q&A, answering any questions that might have come up, I just wanted you to know that I'm definitely sending out the recording of this tomorrow. And if there's any questions that come up later that I answer and it's not answered live, I will throw it in the email as well. Thank you for sitting here and listening to me yammer on. Just so you guys know, I practiced all afternoon to make sure it'd be nice and smooth. Let's go into the Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing and then see if Coach Michelle can help us. Oh,
yeah.
Coach Michelle, Hi, are there any questions for us?
Sure. One question is, would jumping on a small trampoline give the same results as jumping on like a harder surface?
I don't think so. Because if you think about that measurement, it's the ground impact. You're going against gravity, and then with the trampoline, it's kind of, what do you call it, absorbing some of the force. I think jumping straight on the ground is going to be more impactful for your bones than jumping on a trampoline. But it's better to have trampoline than jump on there than do no jumping. But the ground contact is going to be more effective.
Great. What are some examples of strength training that isn't lifting weights in the gym, such as maybe functional fitness?
So if you think about strength training, the idea of strength training, you're getting stronger because you're challenging your muscles. Actually, does the person want to, what do they mean by functional fitness? Because these days everyone describes everything as functional fitness, and I'm not sure. Wait.
Just things that you do around, for example, gardening, right? So you're squatting, lifting,
yes,
like that, but other examples.
Okay, yeah. I think of strength training as tradition. So if you think about in terms of so when you do strength training and it stimulates the muscles, that also, there's a connection between muscle and bone that stimulates bone building cells. So if you're going to be gardening, if you're carrying heavy things, because you can think farmers, like kids who work on a farm, they're super strong because they're not doing traditional strength training, but they're lifting heavy bales of hay. They're lifting topsoil. So yes, as long as it feels hard, if that makes sense. So if you're always doing under a certain weight and it's easy, then you're not challenging yourself. So you can think of it as more as when it feels hard, then that's strength training.
Okay. Is the strength training is it supposed to be heavier weight, lower reps, or lighter weight, higher reps?
Heavier weight, lower reps.
Okay.
So I think a lot of classes will do, and there's nothing wrong with it, they might do lighter weight, a lot of reps. So you're kind of fatiguing and it's a little bit more endurance. But when we're talking about for perimenopause, postmenopause, you want heavier weights, lower reps. And in case anyone doesn't know, it's that combo because it's not possible to do heavy weights with a lot of reps, because then it wouldn't be heavy. So when they say, when you hear experts or like influencers or doctors say heavy lifting, they mean low reps, heavy loads.
Thank you.
Great. All right, let's see. Somebody mentioned that they have a nervousness or anxiety around if they are working out too hard, that their heart will actually give out. They know that it's an intrusive thought, but it's holding them back. Any suggestions on how to navigate that nervousness?
Well, I think first, to allay any fears, you should probably talk to your doctor just to make sure, like, I don't know if there's heart issues or if there's any pre-existing things like genetically, like your parent, that's causing that fear. You can think in general, when you are working out or pushing yourself to that level, it's strength training for your heart. You're getting your heart used to working through different ranges, different capacities, and that's what makes the heart stronger. So that's why the idea of a hit or sit, it's not comfortable going to that level, I can tell you, but it's like same thing in life emotionally. When you have to deal with the highs and the lows and you're able to, that's what makes you stronger. And it's going to be the same when it comes to your heart, when it comes to like strength training, all that kind of stuff. I hope that answered the question. If you have more questions about the heart, I feel like there's something behind that fear, as in it did fear of like a heart attack, or has there been someone in the family that's had issues with pushing the heart rate to that level? I think the most important thing is making sure your doctor clears you, like if you've already had high blood pressure or something like that.
Great. Next question. Sorry, I was just scrolling down.
That's okay.
Do you have suggestions for working around physical restrictions related to injuries in terms of exercise, ways to create some modifications?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's always going to be, you always want modifications. So if you have a recent injury, I think any of the PTs, physical therapists who are not old school physical therapists, will tell you to do the movement within the range that there's no increasing pain. So I think in the past, physical therapists would be like, oh, don't do anything. But today's physical therapists coming out of school, the belief is movement is better than no movement. And you're just trying to find the range or the weight where where it's not creating pain and where you can gradually build from. If I didn't answer it exactly, please feel free to pop in. I do want to depending on how many questions talk to you guys about hormone therapy, because I recently did a podcast on it because one of my clients has said, I'm getting FOMO about hormone therapy because she doesn't have any strong symptoms. She's 56. She still gets her period. She has like some hot flashes, but all over Instagram, all these doctors are going on and on about how they take hormone therapy. And I didn't, but I tried it when I had insomnia, but I actually went on it. And it's helped my sleep immensely. So that's something really important if you have certain symptoms, but for me, I was thinking it was going to be helpful for my osteopenia. So a lot of research has shown that hormone therapy, you shouldn't be using it to prevent stuff, but it can be helpful for sleep, for heart health, for bone density, for memory. But it's something you definitely, I want you to think about, to talk to your menopause educated doctor about. Because when I talked to my doctor about it a couple years ago, she's like, oh, I don't know, but she's going through perimenopause right now. When I asked her about it this time and asking her about talking to her about all the different doctors that are saying that they're on it, she's like, yeah, you could try it. And she's like, we'll check in a month to see how you're feeling. So the contraindications for someone going to hormone therapy after you talk to doctors, if you have breast cancer history, in your family, that's going to be something where they're most likely not going to put you on it. But a lot of it's going to be kind of, remember, there's no perfect formula. I have a client who just went on it because she couldn't sleep at all. And so for her, she's starting to get headaches. So it's like kind of trying to figure out the dosage. But knowing that that is an option, whereas it wasn't popular years ago because of some faulty research that was out there.
Thanks, Tina. Do we have time for maybe two more?
Yeah. Are you guys okay? I think it's 8:03. We'll get you out of here by like before 8:15. Yeah, let's talk.
All right. Is the long-term goal with sit and hit twice per week, or is there potential to work up to more?
I think twice per week is good. You could work up to more if you're doing it the textbook way, not doing a lot. Like I said, a lot of hit classes, they're called hit, but they're not pushing you to that intensity where you're pushing and then resting, pushing, resting. You will never see sprint interval training in a class. So if you're going to do the sit, you'll probably do it on your own. And the reason why you won't see in a class is because a lot of people would be like, I feel like I'm not doing anything. They don't understand, like, if you're pushing hard, you need the rest. So an example would be like sprinting for 20 seconds on the bike as hard as you can go, and then resting for a minute and a half. You can imagine in a group fitness class, people will be like, I'm not doing anything. So if you're ever going to do something like that, that'd probably be on your own. Anything that's more hit, you'll probably see in a class. In terms of doing it more times, I think you're going to have to feel, it's going to be being aware of how you feel in your body. And an example of how things change as you get older. So I probably, maybe a few years ago, I could probably, if I wanted to do 2 workouts a day, not that, just, and for me, I might do it because it's for social, like I want to take a class with someone else and I already worked out. But I noticed, like, this past year, if I do 2 in one day, I'm shot the next day. So I'm like, okay, it's not going to work. So I think working up to more than twice a week for hit will all depend on being dialed in on how your body feels.
And did you make any changes to your diet during perimenopause that were helpful?
I did not, but I also, weight gain wasn't one of the symptoms I had. This is a tough subject because you will see people selling perimenopause and menopause weight loss, and often what they're selling is calorie reduction. And as we all know, being women and dealing with the thoughts of weight loss all our lives, there is no magical formula. There is no the menopause diets that are out there, like the ones from dietitians. It's basically eating a balanced diet, which is so unsexy, and also it doesn't feel like, well, I'm not doing anything. I think so. I don't really have an answer for that. I think it's going to be very individual. It's sometimes when you get older, and this answer is not going to be popular, it's just kind of doing all the things that's good for your health, but also just accepting you just are where you are. When I think about it, it's like kind of changing your perspective of what your goals are. So if you're going to the gym now, you're starting to strength train, instead of focusing, and I know this is trying to push my perspective onto other people. It's like focusing on the weight loss can be very frustrating and sad. It just feels so like heavy as a goal. So it might be, I like the idea of going into the gym or starting on the strength journey, either like, I want to get really good at this, I want to get stronger at this, I want to learn how to do this better, where you're kind of just shifting what you're focusing on. Because if you're doing all the things that are great for your body, lifting weights, you're doing things that's good for your heart, you're getting better and more agile. Does it, what the scale is and all that stuff is, to me, less important. But I get the attachment of, like, we all do want to look good or look like how we envision that we want to look. That's not much of an answer, but that's what I got.
Right. Let me see. There was one more question about fertility during perimenopause and if it works differently than before for instance?
You can still get pregnant during perimenopause because remember, your hormones are fluctuating. So when you say fertility, do you mean birth control? Um, uh, so in terms of getting pregnant, you could be up to the last day of you not getting your period anymore, get pregnant. So you're still going to be able to have a kid. It's just probably a little bit more difficult. In terms of birth control, this is going to be something you're going to talk to your menopause certified healthcare provider. I had a good friend who was on an IUD. She didn't even know she didn't even know she was postmenopause till they took the IUD out because you have to take it out at a certain age. And they're like, oh, you already went through menopause. And then she realized, she goes, no wonder for like a year she was always feeling depressed and blah, blah, blah. So for her, she didn't know because of her periods, but when she thought about it in retrospect, she understood from some of the symptoms that she had.
Thank you. One more question. Sorry, I almost missed this. Do you know many people with heart palpitations as a symptom? This person is currently undergoing cardiac workup, but it's also
Yeah.
coupled with more common perimenopause symptoms.
Yeah. So Oprah was that main one that actually blew my mind, that she went to heart doctors and they gave her heart medication and it didn't change anything. Um, I don't know of anyone else besides Oprah that that had it, but last year I had heart palpitations, but I was already post-menopause. So then I just went to see a cardiologist. So I think when you have that, it's definitely something to talk to first your menopause certified uh, healthcare provider, and then they would direct you. So what their job is, they're not going to just say you're in perimenopause. They're ruling out anything sinister. They're like, okay, I know what age you are, I know what you're feeling, and they would probably still direct you to see a cardiologist, to, like you're saying, to get blood work done, probably get what do you call that? Is it a sonogram? Whatever that, because I remember that you have to basically, they check your heart health. So you're probably going to be still sent to see something like that, but it's not abnormal to have heart palpitations during perimenopause.
I think I got all the questions.
Fantastic.
If I missed your question, I'm really sorry. I tried to grab them all. Please, feel free to reach out with any of them if they weren't answered. And if before we leave tonight, if you could just drop one takeaway from this hour together, a thought, something you learned, or even a question, especially if you have any other questions, and then I can add them to the list so that Tina has them.
Thank you, guys. And then I will send this out by tomorrow. And if there's any questions not answered, like I said, I'll put it in there. And thank you guys for sharing what day is today? Is today Wednesday? Today's Tuesday. Oh, today's Tuesday. Thank you for sharing your Tuesday with me. My God, so thrown off by the 3-day weekend. And also, if you ever have any questions or want guidance, like I love talking about this stuff because I had to kind of, like I said, figure out the hard way. Feel free to shoot me an email. You have my email, message on, Instagram, whatever, because I want to make sure everyone has as much information that you feel comfortable going into this period of your life. I know it sounded like gloom and doom when I was saying this stuff, but it's just whatever. Like if you were to describe what you'd go through as a teenager, do you think anybody would want to be a teenager? How horrible to have that kind of emotional or like turmoil and have all that bullshit happening with like teenage friends. Like no one would want to be a teenager. So it's just part of being a woman. And then after you get through it, you just make adjustments. At least we are all proactive about it, right? Trying to make sure we're going into our older years with knowledge and action. Thank you guys all for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you.